Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening for the Northwest Community Council meeting, January 15th, 2024, first meeting of the new year. I am going to call this meeting to order at 7:01. I am Councillor Pam Lovelace, Hammonds Plains St. Margaret's, District 13. And I will just say that I'll do the land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to do a bit of a roll call just to make sure everybody has the video and audio. The Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. I'm going to go over to you, Madam Deputy Mayor.
Good evening. Pleased
Wonderful.
to be here this evening, Madam Chair.
And our Vice Chair has joined us.
Hey.
We're just doing a roll call and sound check.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Sorry for the delay. I had to restart my computer.
No worries.
Thanks.
Councillor Outfit.
Just lowly old regular member here, no deputy or mayor or vice or anything, but very pleased to be here as always, Madam Chair.
So, well, that's exciting, and we will send our very best wishes to Councillor
Yes.
Paul Russell. He is on a leave of absence right now, and so we send him our very best.
Here, here.
To the approval of minutes for December the 11th, 2023. Do we see any errors or omissions in those minutes?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by our Deputy Mayor. Is there a seconder?
Second?
Councillor Blackburn. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, that motion has carried. We're going to move on to approval of order of business, approval of additions and deletions. Madam Clerk, do you have any updates or changes for us today?
There have been no additions or deletions from the clerk's office.
And any members of committee, do you have anything that you'd like to add to this very, very busy agenda tonight? No? Wonderful. Could I call for a motion then to approve the agenda as presented?
Move that we accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Blackburn, and seconded by Councillor Outfit. I'll call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Oh, and we have Councillor Paul Russell with us.
Good evening from Lower Sackville.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
No
Great
problem.
to see you.
Glad
Great
to be here.
I'm just going to jump on with the approval of the order of business. Did I call for the question? All those in favor say aye. All
Aye.
opposed, nay. Excellent. That has carried. So business arising out of minutes, there are none. I'm going to call for the declaration of conflict of interest if any committee member has a conflict to declare with today's agenda. Not seeing any, going to move to motions of reconsideration, motions of rescission, consideration of deferred business, all none. And there are no notices of table matters this evening. We don't have a public hearing, but moving on to correspondence. Madam Clerk, what have you got for us this evening for correspondence?
No correspondence was received from the clerk's office.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, do you have any petitions to table this evening? No petitions. Thank you. We do not have any presentations, so I'm going to move to public participation. Now, I'm just wondering, I don't have a list of people that have signed up. Katie, what have you got for us this evening? Do we have any public participation?
No one registered ahead of the meeting for public participation.
Okay, so we're going to move on then to the next item, which is information items brought forward from the December 11th meeting. And I brought the Bedford West water quality status update for summer 2023. So we're going to have a presentation from Elizabeth Montgomery, the water resources specialist for HRM, and Emma Waddy, manager of environment, who are both here today. So we're going to throw the floor over to you, Elizabeth and Emma.
Hi, yeah, it's going to be me, sorry, giving the presentation, and then Emma and I are both available to answer questions afterwards. And
Perfect,
sorry,
thank you so much.
I'm just going to attempt to share my screen here. I think I need permission to share my screen from the meeting host.
1 second, I'll get it all suited up for you.
Thank you.
You should be good to go.
Okay. So
Oh,
this is just
perfect. Thanks,
everyone
Elizabeth.
can see.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. So I can take questions during the presentation or at the end. I just only have one screen. So if you're going to ask a question in the middle, please just speak up because I won't be able to see if you've raised your hand. So this is an update on the Bedford West Water Quality Monitoring Program from the summer 2023 sampling event. So just as some background on what this program is, the Bedford West is a development in this area of the municipality and it's been phased. So some of the sub areas are under construction and some are currently in the approval process and some are still pending. And this has been going on since 2006. So part of one of the requirements under the development agreement is that water quality monitoring be done to track potential eutrophication in the Kearney Lake and Paper Mill Lake watershed. And eutrophication is the process of nutrient enrichment. So while it is technically a natural process, it's extremely sped up by human activities, and that can have downstream effects of increased algal bloom, increased nuisance aquatic plant growth, potentially blue-green algae, and low oxygen in the bottom of the lake in summertime, and just other general negative effects. So we're tracking that with this program. So the development agreement, there's a collection of development agreements under the secondary planning strategy that where this is within. And so sampling needs to take place for the duration of each development agreement, which there's been development agreements in place under this secondary planning strategy at least since 2009. And then for 2 years after completion of the development agreement, in effect, this has just been ongoing since 2009, and sampling locations are added or removed perhaps under different development agreements. But for the most part, all the sampling locations that you see labeled here on the map have been part of the program and continue to be part of the program throughout the course of all the development agreements. And through this program, sampling occurs 3 times annually. So we sample in the spring, typically that's been in May. We sample in the summer, typically that's been in August. And we sample in the fall, typically that's been October, November. And there has been some change to those dates, but it's typically within the same window annually. And you may have seen some similar reports come to this council before because it's a requirement of the development agreements that we report results here. So like I said, we report to you folks, the Northwest Community Council, 3 times annually, and we also share those reports once they've gone to the Northwest Community Council to the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board. So this summer report has already gone as well to the Regional Watersheds Advisory Board, and they had a similar presentation there. And so we report exceedances. Follow-up testing can be requested. It typically isn't, but we did request follow-up testing in the last year. And in particular consideration is given if there's an exceedance of phosphorus, and that's total low-level phosphorus, and that is an indicator of the eutrophication process. So under these development agreements, we don't want to see phosphorus above 10 micrograms per liter. And that's because that's a reflection of a tipping point between different trophic states, which is just a way of saying like nutrient density in the water. And so these lakes that we're monitoring have been identified previous to this as being within the oligotrophic state, which is the upper ceiling for that trophic state is 10 micrograms per liter. So that's why we have this threshold. And then E. coli, we also were looking for less than 200 colony forming units per 100 milliliters. And that's reflective of the recreational water quality guidelines, because both Kearney Lake and Paper Mill Lake are heavily used recreationally. So that's why that threshold is there as well. So for this sampling event specifically, we didn't see any exceedance of phosphorus, which is great news. And we saw one exceedance of E. coli at Kearney Lake 1, which is, if you remember from the other slide, it's near-ish to the beach on Kearney Lake. And we did see higher than typical exceedances of E. coli generally at the beach this year. We think it was because of the heavy precipitation. We didn't request resampling of E. coli from this event because we had some just delays getting results, and E. coli results are extremely variable in time and space. So resampling for E. coli doesn't really reflect, it wouldn't really be a confirmation. It would be reflective of completely different aquatic conditions. So we didn't request that. There had been some rain, and we just left it where it was. There were some other minor exceedances observed that you may have seen in the attachment to the staff report. They are high compared to the freshwater aquatic life guidelines that we're following, but they are reflective of conditions previously observed under this program. For example, like we tend to see low pH in Nova Scotia in general, but in these lakes in particular. And that is just because we have a lot of acidic rock around. We have low pH waters as a natural state. So while technically they're under the pH guideline, it isn't necessarily related to the development activities. So we aren't pursuing further action there at this time. And so that's the end of my presentation, but I am happy to take questions. Oh,
Still on mute. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Really appreciate that. I'm just going to go to the chat to see if anyone has any questions.
Okay.
I don't see any. Oh, there is a question from Councillor Updike. Go ahead, Councillor.
Sorry, I did the raised hands. I should have done chat. And obviously, thank you for the presentation. And I guess my question, well, there's several questions here for several comments. The first is that we usually send this off to regional council as an information item. I think that's appropriate again. But I think what I'd like to ask maybe both Elizabeth and Emma is obviously there's more development taking place in several areas, as you mentioned. There's also upcoming development under the provincial fast tracking program around Sandy Lake. So I'm just wondering behind the scenes, what's going on to expand or prepare, if you will, your work in this process to obviously look at other areas around Kearney, but also prepare for what could and eventually may happen around Sandy. I'm always a little bit, I don't know, confused or disappointed or something, that while I understand, and I remember Steve Craig and I talking about this many years ago when he was still on community council with this, that we track this and staff is very good and tracking this through the development agreement and bringing it forward to us and to the council. But if the things were really exceeding, and I'm thinking E. coli and to some extent phosphorus, it's often, people would like to say, well, it's all the development and whatnot, but quite often it could be fertilizers, it could be old septic systems breaking down and whatever. What ability do we have, if any, to go sort of back and look at the source and try to mitigate the cause?
So I can speak to Kearney Lake and this development agreement a little better than I can to Sandy Lake. I think we're looking, I'm participating in the environmental studies that are going on in Sandy Lake right now, just as a reviewer. And
I guess my point was, I just want
far
to make
too
sure.
soon.
I sort of just want to make sure that this sort of thing, something's going to happen around Sandy at some point. But I just want to make sure that we're doing at least what we're doing here. But is there learning from what we're doing here that could be put to Sandy to make it even better, if you will?
Yes, definitely. Because I think, like, to your point, we do collect a lot of data and it does seem to sit. So we have been working with the developer. Like, this is the first time in a while we've requested resampling when we've seen exceedances of phosphorus, not necessarily under the summer program, but just this year. And you can expect a more fulsome report that will come with the fall sampling, because we get a year-end analysis from the consultant as well, and we do kind of trend analysis. And so from that, we'll see. I mean, the good news is so far under this program, we really haven't seen significant phosphorus loading in the lake, which is good news. But I think, to your point, contaminants like phosphorus are hard to track the source of. And so something we're working on that came out of a staff report that Councillor Morris had requested for a management plan for Kearney Lake last year is a management framework for land use at the watershed scale. Yeah. And I would say that we're targeting spring to the Environment and Sustainability Standing Committee for that. So the implementation of that, if it goes forward, will address some of those root causes, because it's more about looking at land use and trying to manage that way rather than just tracking and maybe remediating if possible after the fact. So you can look for that coming up later this year. And then for this development, more specifically, we are enabled by the development agreement to do more land use planning overview than we even maybe are in other places, because it says specifically, like, if we start to see phosphorus loading or significant E. coli that we think can be attributed to the development, we are enabled to take remedial action there. I think another thing that we're trying to do as well is, this development agreement was signed, I believe, in 2005. That's a long time ago, especially from a biology perspective. And we've learned a lot about like what we can do and what we can require from developers that maybe we wouldn't have when this started. So the development agreements that are being signed now are meeting our stormwater aesthetic objectives, where they need to contain stormwater to the property, and they have to demonstrate that they're containing total phosphorus. And we're more involved with monitoring activities and requiring follow-up testing if there's been a sedimentation event as well in the new development agreements that are being signed under Bedford West. And so rather than just having this kind of like snapshot 3 times a year sampling, we also should be a little bit more responsive to spills. And by spills, I really do mean like a sedimentation pond overflows, say, during the construction process, and that ends up in the lake. So we're looking at managing it that way. And this is something, this is a unique program really in the municipality. I'm not aware, we're not managing any other programs like this. So we're learning from this and seeing what's working, and, having the long data set is really good. We'll be able to track changes to the lake if they occur, but also, like you said, we're hoping to make the programs that we see going forward where we're able a little more responsive.
Okay. And that's great. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak. If not, Madam Chair, I still have a couple of things to say, but I can come back if you want.
I'm just going to say a couple of things, Councillor, and I'm just going to throw it back to you because, this history, I think, is very important for people to understand. That it started, 10 years ago, longer than that, actually. So we're at a point now, almost 20 years ago, where we're kind of catching up. There's, science has changed, the filtering and testing processes have changed. We're stuck with these legal agreements at this point under these development agreements. But moving forward, what I'm hearing, Elizabeth, is that we're being a little bit more cognizant of modernizing those agreements. My concern with this is this assumption, I guess, that the results will be handed to the Regional Watershed Advisory Board, and that they will have the ability to do something with that. Because what we're looking at right now with Bill, there's been so many bills, Bill 329, I guess, is that the Regional Watershed Board has actually lost its powers to advise the Environment and Sustainability Community for HRM. So I just, it seems to me that we're pretty constrained as far as what we can actually do. So I agree with Councillor Out that I would like to see this move forward to regional council to have it tabled. It seems to me that if this was done in August, Elizabeth, then we would have had some sampling following that massive flood. Right. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to those 2 points about the role of the Regional Watershed Board, if there is any. And then secondly, what do you expect that we're going to see some changes again in the fall with regards to the impact of the floods to this area?
So this sampling event that's before you, I'll take the flood question first, is probably more reflective of the flooding conditions than the one that we saw in the fall. Because the heavy rain event was July 21st, I believe, and this was the end of August. So we'd expect to see more like a closer tie. And so that's like we had extremely high bacteria in this area for a good chunk of the summer. I believe the bacteria is most likely tied to the flooding. We didn't capture a major increase in phosphorus related to the flooding. That's not to say that there wasn't additional contamination added to the lake, just that it wasn't captured. But that is something that we'll like start to see. It may compound over time as well. So we're watching it that way. So that's, I guess, I hope I answered your question about the flooding. As far as the role of the Regional Watershed Advisory Board, it's, you know, Emma and I are the staff assigned to that as well. And we, at our last meeting, had some discussion about, like, in general, what is the role of the Regional Watershed Advisory Board now? And that's kind of been an ongoing discussion now that they aren't allowed to comment on development agreements. And I think I have a little insight, hopefully, there, where these development agreements were signed when there wasn't a significant, the planning staff was much smaller. There really was 3 people on the environment and climate change team as it was then. And so we have more folks who understand what they're doing and more support generally to handle that in-house. But also it's our understanding that we may also be able to get help from members of the Regional Watershed Advisory Board, like tailoring our water quality programs generally to capture better results and be able to reflect reflect some of the issues that you folks are talking about now. So that is potentially, and again, we're still figuring out what the Regional Watershed Advisory Board is going to look like going forward. But we think there's a role where they can, advise and work with us on improving our water programming more generally that doesn't necessarily tie directly to development. That's where we're at now. And there is a lot of years of expertise on the Regional Watershed Advisory Board to help us with that to help advise with that sort of thing. So I don't really have specifics, but that is a potential way that we've discussed to work with that board without, within the constraints of the provincial legislation that's limited them.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you mentioned the expertise that are, that the volunteers who are on that Regional Watershed Advisory Board are incredible. We're very fortunate to have them. And we, would like to keep them. So it's good to hear that there's some work happening, and I'll step into the next meeting, see how things are going with that board. I'm going to pass it over to Councillor Outhet. I think you've got your hand up, and I think you've got
my hand is still up. Yes, and thank you. The questions that you asked, Chair, and Elizabeth answered did touch on some of the things I was looking for. And I did want to start off, and I meant to do this last time, to say to Elizabeth and to Emma how helpful they have been on a number of occasions when I've had questions regarding Sandy or Carney or paper mill. So thank you very much. Your efforts are appreciated. And I can tell you're passionate about it as well as, educated in the fashion about these issues.
Thank you.
I think when moving forward, because we're not the advisory committees and how empowered they're going to be, even if they're even going to exist and this sort of thing, we probably need to, going forward, if there's any revisions to this, or certainly again preparing for Sandy, probably empower council or community councils and to be a little more engaged with this maybe as well, just in case, even though I know that expertise that we have in those volunteer committees are great if we're allowed to use them. But also, I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about when does this trigger an alarm that we then call Nova Scotia Environment and say, you know, what's going on here? This has been exceeded. Is there a problem? Because I know you and I have talked in the past where, and again, it's more about Sandy, where the province means well, but they get a report of blue algae, let's say, for example, blue green algae, and they say, oh, we've had a report. They put it on their websites, and everybody starts thinking it's there and it's bad and whatnot. And then we go out and do some testing, and sometimes it's there, and often it isn't. How are we coming along with that relationship with the province to escalate things to them, but also are they doing a little bit more, you know, more than just putting it on their website? Has that been resolved where they're actually looking into these situations yet?
For blue-green algae, it's been a little bit more responsive this year. I think too, like between, like I know I have learned a lot in the past 2 years, and the folks, like the environment officers who respond have, you can, like I can tell, you know, that I've learned a lot and they are learning as well. So I think we're getting better quality watching just from like the learning that's going on in both of our departments. For sediment spills, there's a more formalized process. So, for example, we did have a sedimentation event in Kearney Lake that was reported by a resident to us actually this fall. You're probably aware of this.
Yep.
And so that's, I mean, we're involved tangentially. That's Ashley Blissette's team in development engineering that works directly. But when there's a sedimentation event like that, that Nova Scotia Environment Climate Change has a clear process and they engage. They engage with the developer and the development engineers. And I apologize if I'm getting this process not quite right. Ashley would be a better person to speak to it than me, but they engage and they look for remedial action. So if we can tie a set, and it's challenging when it's like you said, Councillor, overland flow or herbicides or old septic fields that we don't even know are there. That is a challenge, and that's something that we're looking to address more through direct resident engagement that we're planning on doing in the future. But as far as like when there's a sediment spill from a construction site, the gap in response is typically if it doesn't get reported. So, but if it gets reported, and in the case of this one that happened in Kearney Lake, it did, then there's a clear action plan. And if, when the source is identified, they have to show that, they've been, they're meeting the minimum erosion and sedimentation control requirements. And typically these things happen in the initial, like early stages of construction during site clearing when there's a lot of ground open. So we would expect, like for the site, for the Bedford West 10 sites that are just across the lake from Kearney Lake, for example, we would expect the highest risk of a spill like that to come early in the process, like early.
And we and the province and all departments, your department and Ashley and the province, I hope would be, and there's good developers involved here, and I take comfort in that. But we're going to have to be very careful around Sandy. We're going to be very careful around 10 there and Kearney, and I'm sure you know that. But anyway, I've taken too much of your time, but I always learn something, and thank you for being there, and thank you, Chair, for your flexibility.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Outfit. This is an important discussion. And I appreciate Elizabeth and Emma coming today to talk to us. It sounds like we've got more eyes on this than we've had in the past, which is really important. And certainly we'll be looking forward to working closely with our colleagues at Provincial Department of Environment to make sure that we catch anything actually before it happens. And thank you about that description about the sedimentation and the importance of that process. I really appreciate that. Okay, so Councillor Outfit, did you want to have this report forwarded to Regional Council?
Yeah, I think what my advice, I'll ask for a little guidance on this. I think the upcoming report, if I heard correctly from Elizabeth, is going to be a little more in depth and a little more meat to it. So maybe this one just goes off to Regional Council as an information report. When we receive the next one, maybe we can debate whether we want to take further action or not, send it to CPEDs or to environmental, send it to or see whatever. But for now, can we just forward this then as an information report? Does that suffice?
That sounds good. So, Councillor, if you can read the motion, please. It's in the chat.
I will do that. And thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
I move that the Northwest Community Council forward the report dated December 7th, 2023 to Regional Council for information. So moved.
Second.
Oh, I think that's been seconded by Councillor Russell. Thank
Now
you,
we go.
Councillor Russell. Call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Excellent. That motion has carried. Good work. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you all.
Send that off to Regional Council as an information report. Colleagues, we're going to move on to 14.1.1, case 2023-01.49, the Suburban Planning Area Land Use Bylaw Amendment to interim bonus zoning requirements for applicable plan amendment applications. That's a long title. Who wants this one?
I can
Everybody.
take this. I can
Thank-
take this, Madam Chair. I move that Northwest Community Council give first reading to consider approval of the proposed amendments to applicable land use bylaws as set out in Attachment B of the staff report dated October 23rd, 2023, and to schedule a public hearing to be held concurrently with Harbor East Marine Drive Community Council and Halifax and West Community Council. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a second or seconded by Councillor Outfit? I should say that we do have Brendan Lamb. He's a planner too, and Kathleen Freilich, principal planner, available to ask questions, or sorry, to answer questions. So Councillor Blackburn, do you have anything on this?
I don't have anything to add. I don't think we have a presentation on this. No, and I suspect we'll probably dig into some debate when it's before all three community councils at a future date. Thank you.
Perfect. The only thing I will just say then is, Katie, if you want to explain this to us. So we're going to have a joint committee with council and all community councils to formally pass this. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the clerk's office, after this is passed, will coordinate with all members of council to kind of figure out a perfect date that works for everyone. And we're also going to coordinate with planning and the legal team to figure out what solicitor will be attending, and the public will receive the adequate notice for the public hearing, and it will follow the same procedures as that. But we're going to confirm a date probably after the Halifax and West Community Council meeting tomorrow and go from there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that
Madam
explanation.
Chair, just a question or suggestion to Katie. I mean, we've done some joint community council meetings now, actually on Tuesdays as part of a regional council meeting. And if this is involving 3 community councils, that is then all community. That's all members of council, 5 times, three times, whatever. Is there a chance that we could just do this as part of, rather than trying to get everybody scheduled, is the clerk's office looking at just tying this in with a regional council meeting at some time soon?
Right now we were looking at it separately because there's so much time constraint with budget and everything coming up in February. So then it might be an earlier March meeting even, just depending on availability of everyone.
No, just curious. Okay, thanks very much. Not a big deal.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Councillor Outfit, it's not a public hearing of regional council, it's a public hearing of community councils. So by blending the two of them together, people may be confused but it is a public hearing, obviously, and clerk's office will make sure that everybody has adequate notice. If there's nothing more on this, shall I call for the question?
Question.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That motion has carried. Well, thank you, Katie, for all of that explanation. We're going to move on to number 15, motions. There are none. In camera today, we do not have any. There are no added items. So, notice of motions. Do we have any notices of motions, colleagues? Alrighty then. So the date of our next meeting will be February 26, 2024. And before we adjourn, I just want to say how happy we are to see you, Councillor Paul Russell.
Thank you very much.
You're here.
Yay.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Great to have you. Right on. Anyone care to adjourn the meeting? Motion to adjourn? Thank you.
Thanks all.
Have a
Good night.
great night, everyone.
Good night.